Hello, girls. In today's lesson, I'm going to talk about the cell cycle and mitosis. Okay, so I think it's time for us to look into the actual process of cell division. Okay, in my last lesson, I've talked about cell division and what actually happens generally. So now I'm going to talk about what actually happens, what are the sequence of events that actually happen during a cell division. Okay, so let's look at what is the meaning of a cell cycle. All right, a cell cycle refers to the events, the sequence of events that starts with DNA multiplication and also continues until the cell actually divides and produces two daughter cells. So the whole sequence of events from the beginning until the end, when you get two daughter cells, in the end you get two, right? And that the whole thing is called a cell cycle. All right. Okay. So the cell cycle actually consists of two phases. So we call them interphase and M phase. Okay. Now, interphase is the longest phase in the cell cycle. So it takes about, it accounts for 90% of the time. Okay. And in the interphase, it is made up of three separate stages. Okay. Let's look at this diagram that I've written out for you. So generally, right, cell cycle is divided into two phases. One is called the interphase, which takes up about 90% of the whole time. So 它大部分的时间是在那个 interphase. Okay, and only 10% of the time when you actually see the nucleus dividing, the chromosome splitting into two parts and then moving to left and right and all that. So that is actually coming under M phase. All right. Okay. So under interphase, we have three smaller division where you have three events happening. Okay. So they are called G1, S, and G2 phase. So G1 phase, S, and G2 phase. Now let's see what actually happens during interphase. Okay, so during interphase is actually the preparation stages. All the preparation is done for cell division, okay, where they collect energy, they produce energy, and then they get ready the DNA material to split into two groups of DNA or two groups of chromosome. Okay, at this moment, interphase, the nucleus is well defined. That means it's very easy to see the nucleus. It is big, all right, and it is dark and is easily seen, all right, at this time. So this is the whole cell, all right? So this is an interphase. And at that time, during interphase, the chromosomes are not condensed. That means they are very thin. They are not really visible under the microscope. So they are very thin and they are not condensed. So they are very, long and the thread-like material. They look thread-like. So you call them chromatin at this time. Okay, now let's look at each one of them. G1, all right? G1. Now, what happens during G1? Okay, look at this diagram here. It shows you the entire time. So we start from here. So the entire almost takes up about 90% of the time already. Okay, so that is the interphase. And only this small little portion here is about 10%. All right. Okay. Now let's look at G phase. So G phase, what happens in G phase? We can say the cell actually grows, and then mitochondria, the cell components are produced at this stage. All right. And also proteins are synthesized. So at this stage, the nucleus looks quite big, quite well defined, and the chromosome is very thread-like and very not visible in the form of thick. It's not condensed, so we call this chromatin. So it looks like this, all very long and so on. Okay. So S phase. Now, during this time, DNA synthesis occurs. That means the amount of DNA is replicated. That means double. Okay, each chromosome now multiplies into two identical chromosomes known as sister chromatid. So 这里是一个 chromatid，这个 OK， 这个整条是 chromatid， 这边也是 chromatid。Alright, so we have two chromatids joined together in the middle here. We call the centromere. Okay, so the central part is called centromere. Now, remember this side is not like this. It's still very thread-like. So 你不会看到是这样的。这个我是画给你看的。So it's still, you have two, but it's still very, loose material. It's still very, very long. It's like very, you can't really see it very well. Okay, it's still very chromatin. It's still called chromatin. So both chromatids are joined at the centromere. 中间那个就是 centromere. Okay, and lastly, after that, you have the G2 phase. This one, the cell remains active metabolically. That means a lot of energy being produced, and they gather enough energy to make the final arrangements to enter the next stage. Okay, the next stage will be the M phase. All right, okay, so I'll stop here.